Live streaming is on.
Hello, everybody. We're here. We're getting better. We're only a minute late. Normally, it's like 4 or 5 because there's always technical problems. But today, we haven't had any technical problems. If you want to ask questions, first of all, you got to do it fast because Mark is a really busy man, like one of the busiest mans I've ever known in the world, and he's got to go to a meeting in like an hour. So be fast. Okay. First of all, hello, Mark, my friend. How are you?
Great to see you. Absolutely brilliant. I feel like we're all on holiday, except there's some of us still working, like guys like you and I who work from home a lot of the time. We still have to work. But all my pals are like, this is great. I'm drunk every night. I've gained 40 pounds.
That is like, as I've been talking to all the guys here, like Shaking and everybody else, we're all saying the same thing. They can say, an apocalypse. This is not an apocalypse. This is boring. It's no rain broth flowing from the clouds. There is no, like frogs coming out, like going to kill you. There's nothing happens. Like, well, if you go out, you die. But, yeah. But like, give me something like, no. It's not going to be fun. If you go out, you die.
But what I love though is lots of people at the beginning were saying, oh my God, how are you coping? And I was like, all the comic guys have been living like this for 20, 25, 30 years. Like this is you're now living our life. We've been in one room for years. We're very well prepared. Very well prepared.
Yeah, we are. This, I always say the same thing. Like, this wasn't used until 2 months ago. Right. Now this is Paloma's desk because he has to work from home.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the first days I kept making the joke, welcome to my world. The first days he looked at me in a way like, shut the fuck up or you're dying. And I'm like, okay. But they gotta used to our world. This is our life.
So I do want them all to leave again though, because I liked our world, but it was kind of private, wasn't it? Like I don't want the kids getting used to this. Like the homeschooling is the toughest thing, isn't it? I mean, that's so hard. Like I was good this week. I did a lot of the homeschooling, because my wife had done most of it, and this week I was like, right, listen, I haven't been pulling my weight. I'll do most of it this week,
Mm-hmm.
So like Monday, I was amazing. I was like, those movies where a teacher gets into a school and turns the whole place around. I was like that guy on Monday, And as the week has gone on, I've just become like a monster, And today, my 8-year-old was doing this farm project, and she was putting together this PDF where she had hedgehogs and raccoons and things as farm animals. And I was like, a raccoon isn't a farm animal, I found myself getting really short by the end of the week, So so I think it's good that my wife is taking over again on Monday. Yeah.
Oh, what is that? Is there anything you miss with all this shit? Like, oh my God, they let me out. Like this is over. Mark, go out. Next out, and you're like, this is what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. Massively. I didn't realize how much I ate out and how much I drunk out. I just because it had been such a part of my life for so long. Like. My wife and I will go for breakfast in the morning. Once we put the kids in school, we go for breakfast and we sit and we talk about our day and our plans for the day. And even the fact it's in the kitchen every day now, it sounds, but the fact that you are forced to be in one place over months does get a little tedious, And I miss my pals, I mean, my family I see a lot as well, but I speak to them on the phone. But just having like 8 pals around a bar table, I miss that. I really miss the pub. And we do Zoom, but it's not the same. It's not the same.
No. It's like, well, we can drink. My friends like, no, I need to be with you and chat about whatever shit we can think of, disconnect from the world. In my case, I always say I miss a lot 2 things. One is being alone for breakfast.
Yeah.
I need to wake up, having my 15, 30 minutes with the radio, just my breakfast and disconnect from everything. Now it's all noise. So
yes.
It's like, okay, kids around, so you gotta take care of the kid, forget breakfast and all. And the second is every weekend I used to go on a matinee, to watch a movie on my own.
Yeah.
Just to disconnect from the world. Like it's my movie time, 2 hours where there's nothing else happening. Yeah. And those are the 2 things I miss the most. You miss going to the theater at all, or nah?
Yeah, when you say it out loud, there's so many things we miss. Like we go to the cinema once, probably twice a week. Because we take the kids one day, because there's always a good kids film now. When I was a kid, there was like 2 kids films out a year or something, But now there's like a kids film every week, isn't there? So the kids go and see something with us. And on Fridays, my wife and I, we work together, so we finish work early And before we pick the kids up from school, we go and we get a nice lunch and a glass of wine and everything. And then we go and see a movie, and then we pick the kids up from aftercare in school, and the kids think we've been working so hard, but we've really just been watching a movie all day. And I miss that life. I miss that world a little bit as well. But you know what? I mean, in the global scheme of things, we've got it quite easy. We're lucky that we've got jobs, which is great. And also that we do something that we love. Like, I often think this, the times in my life I've been most into comics and most into movies and everything, but I'm a comic guy primarily, is when your life is hard, isn't it? And I think it's no accident that DC Comics between 1938 and 1943 created all the big characters. Basically the rise of Hitler and almost to the end of World War II. That was the glory years of DC because people wanted to anything but the real world. And I think the same thing. Flash Gordon and all these things came out. World War I and the Spanish flu pandemic with 50 million dead, right? And I do think tough times in my own life and everything, that's what I think, it's good to read Daredevil or something like that. It's good to just escape from reality, isn't it? So I found I've really, really get into work over these 3 months. Like, I'm quite slow. I take about 2 weeks with each issue that I do, quite a long time. And I'm doing over an issue a week now, which for me is unbelievable. But I think I'm just throwing myself into the fantasy world now.
Yeah, it's everybody I'm talking to is having the same situation. We are overworking.
Yeah.
You're at home. Maybe people ask me, nothing has changed. Like, for whatever reason, I'm realizing that all of us who are used to work at home, we're working more. It's not that we are keeping the same pace. I don't know why. But we are all doing the same thing. We are overworking. We are doing more. Yeah. We are finding, some people have been telling me, pandemic, let it be for like 3 more months. Why? Because I could do a book in a year. Like Paco Roca told me yesterday. I normally could do a book in a year, but now I'm realizing I am going to finish it in 6 months. So like, yes, let it last for 3 months. So I can do it. And I'm like, okay, we can always say we are asymptomatic to people. We're sick. We're not really, but we cannot join you because we can get you the contagion. So we can be at home for like I'm not sure about that. Okay, so let's move on. Let me say hello to people so they don't think I'm ignoring them. Fast. Hello, Lockfran. Hello, Paula. Hello, Ivan. Hello, Tony. Hello, Gabriel Walta. Hello, Reseñoño. You have to change that name. This is difficult. Lockfran Howard asks, I love Wanted. What works did you drink to create it? Huh? Do you know? No, I think he means what what books did influence you, but we're talking about drinks. Okay, what books influenced you? I see things from Watchmen on Wanted.
Oh yeah. I mean, every single thing that you ever do in your creative life is influenced by something else, like nothing just pops out of nowhere. Like every single thing going back to Babylonian times has influenced what comes next. So like the Marvel universe was completely influenced by the DC universe. If DC hadn't existed, we would never have had the Marvel universe, to the point where the Fantastic Four was created because the Justice League was selling well, Kirby then went off for a weekend and came up with the Fantastic Four. So for me, the touchstones in my life are Dark Knight, Watchmen, the really great books, Howard Chaykin's American Flag and everything. Like the stuff in the 80s that I grew up with is like my totem pole. That's my Mount Rushmore. I love all that stuff. So it seeps into my work all the time, and it's so obvious when you open it and look at it. There's even lines of dialogue I subconsciously put in because I love this stuff so much.
Okay, that's next question. Felipe Gonzalez says, was it your Millar World project a goal when you started to write comic books? What is always the plan, or that it came later?
No, it completely happened by accident. It really did, because I was one. Maybe it's unusual. I don't know, but I got into comics to do the characters I loved growing up. My mission was not to create my own stuff, which not everybody's like. I know Eric Larson always loved Savage Dragon. He created when he was a kid, and I think Todd probably had Spawn for a long time and everything too. But for me, it was just I wanted to write Superman and Batman and everything. When I was drawing as a kid on my school books and everything, I draw Batman, I draw Superman. So I wanted to do those guys. So everything I did was a step towards that. So I thought the only way to get into comics you know, I would try and start at the top, but it never works, you know. So I started at the bottom, and I did black and white indie stuff to get into 2000 AD because I knew that was the step from there into DC. You know, the only way they would look at you. And even DC, by that point, had Vertigo, and they wouldn't let you into DC. You had to go to Vertigo before they would even look at you at DC because it was slightly lower wages. And I mean, I loved my time at Vertigo, but DC was always my ultimate ambition. And it was actually just a bunch of happy accidents. Like, DC didn't really work out for me. You know, I didn't really fit in there. You know, DC was a little more corporate. It was, I didn't gel, you know, like, I really get on with most people and everything, and I got on with a lot of guys at DC, but it didn't feel like my natural environment. And I'm sure it worked the other way too. I would butt heads with them a little bit. But then I did a book called The Authority around about 2000, which did really well. Like, the sales on it were going up when things were going down. So Marvel headhunted me to come in and do a book for them, Ultimate X-Men. And because it launched at #1, suddenly, like, I was being offered all this Marvel work and an exclusive contract and everything. So that was never my plan to go to Marvel. It worked out great because DC didn't work out. Marvel came along. And I went into my first meeting with Joe Quesada in summer 2000, a few months before Ultimate X-Men came out. And I loved Joe instantly. You know, I just walked in and I saw Joe and all the guys, and it was just like hanging out with your pals. And I thought, these are my guys. And I was like, you know, the ugly duckling type of thing, you know, where you just suddenly, you're with your environment. It's like, okay, this is going to be just fine. I like these guys, you know. And it was actually, I had a couple of years of doing this stuff. Millar World was never in my mind at all, you know. And there was two conversations. Jimmy Palmiotti, who's a friend of both of ours, you know. And Jimmy's very wise, you know. He's the kind of the Vito Corleone of comics, isn't it? You know, he's always sitting back and he'll give you some good advice, you know, in a bar at a convention.
He's one of those guys when he does that gesture, as you said, this one, you know, raises the hand and does this, you're like, okay, shut up, listen. Because it's always going to be a nugget that you maybe don't expect, but that's like, oh, wait, listen, because there's something going, you know, in that brain of his. Yeah.
He is, and he's got a great perspective in the industry. I think he's always made really good moves and everything. And everybody likes Jimmy. He's one of those guys everybody likes, you know. Yeah. And it's always a good night out if Jimmy's there. And Jimmy said to me, and he's always very honest, which I like as well, you know. And Jimmy says to me, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I'm doing all these Marvel books, you know. And I was quite proud of myself because I think round about that time, I had 4 of the top 5 books. Because I remember in this 1 month, there was Ultimate X-Men, Ultimate War issue 1, and Ultimate War issue 2. So I remember I had 4 of the top 5 books. And I was kind of pleased. And Jimmy said, you should do your own stuff, man. You should be doing your own stuff. And I was like, why? He says, nobody remembers the guys who did a little run somewhere. You know, they remember the guys who created something new, you know. Like, X-Men is always going to be Stan Lee, you know, and the Avengers will always be Stan and Jack, you know. Doing Stan Lee for a magazine called SFX in the UK, and they got me to call up Stan. They were getting, like, the guys who worked on Doctor Who were interviewing the people who used to do Doctor Who. So I was like the new guy at Marvel, and they got me to interview the guy who created Marvel, you know. So I phoned up Stan, and it was like talking to God, you know. It was a bit like it was like Moses in the burning bush kind of thing, you know. And I was actually quite scared phoning him up, and I'm not that kind of person, but phoning Stan was a bit like phoning Batman. Or phoning Galactus or something, you know. It's like you almost can't believe Stan's a real person. He's not like you and I, you know. He's a guy who's been drawn in comic books beside these characters, larger than life. So I hesitated, and then I called him up, and we had a great chat. You know, it was a really, really good interview. And he said the same thing as Jimmy Palmiotti, you know. And he said to me, he said, if I was you, he said, you strike me as somebody who'd be good at creating your own stuff. He said, you're reinventing a lot of these characters anyway and putting your own spin on them. He said, I didn't go and work at DC. And he said, I did Marvel, you know, and then that became a thing. He said, if I was you, with the opportunities you have, he says, you actually have the possibility of owning the rights to your creations, which I didn't have. He said, you must be out of your mind. Go and create your own stuff. And the next day I bought a pad. I remember going to the shop, buying the pad, and starting, and Wanted was the first thing. And then it sold as a movie within months and everything. And I was like, this is really easy. This is Stan and Jimmy were right.
That's amazing. When you're writing, I'm curious. I always ask the same to people. When you're writing, do you need cacophony around? Do you need sound? Not even sound, you know, like noise, something, or you are like, shit, no, absolute silence.
I'm like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. Absolutely Nicholson in The Shining. If I can hear 4 rooms away somebody with a ping pong ball or something, I'm like, what? What's going on? And like if I music especially, like I'll either listen to music or I'll write. I can't do both. I've tried it with instrumental, stick on John Barry or Herb Alpert or something completely inoffensive, that's just a lovely tune. But even that, I start thinking about the movie or something instead, instead of the dialogue. Because it's a funny thing, a pal of mine had a really fantastic observation recently. And I was saying, he's another writer, and he's a musician as well. And I said to him, do you find it takes you about an hour to get into it and an hour to come back out of it? Like you're in a little trance for an hour after you've been working. And I said, it sounds really pretentious, but I feel it takes me a little hour to come back to the real world. So I go for a walk at the end of the day before I come back and see the family. So I leave the house and I go a big walk and I'll maybe phone some people and things. And then I come back and then I'm ready to be back in the real world. And he said, every creative person he knows is kind of like that too. And he described it so beautifully. And he said, imagine you're a coal miner. And he said, this is you lowering yourself down into the mine. You go down and it takes a little while and it takes a while to come back up, or you're scuba diving or something. You're going into an altered state essentially when you're writing, because you're in a little dreamy state, aren't you? You're thinking about the plot, you're hearing voices of dialogue and everything. So it does take a little while to come back, So that's why for me, something like music, especially lyrics, would really clash with that. I think it would be impossible to go to that little place where you're at.
It's fun. It's when I finish work, whatever the time it is, whatever, even if it's midnight, I cannot go and have dinner because I cannot disconnect. I need to walk the dog. We have a really close, park, so I need to go to the park, be with the dog for 45 minutes, an hour, and then I can sit down and have dinner. I can't. If I try to just leave work and go have dinner, my brain is so I need this connection. The same thing. Another thing that I was asking that question because I had Olivier a couple of weeks ago, and I asked him exactly the same question, and it's about Magic Order, and he said, when I was doing it, if I'm doing the layouts, I need absolute silence because I'm composing, I'm fitting everything on the page with the storytelling and all.
Yeah.
But when I'm doing the finishes, like finishing the pages or coloring a cover or something, then I go with music, and his process is really amazing because it's like, okay, I'm doing a epic. So I need Last of the Mohicans,
right?
Or like John Williams or something like that, to put me in that epic, so I can just, get my head on it. But if I need, emotion, if I need, an intimate scene, I will go with the classic romantics, classic romantic music from the French composers, so I can get my head on it. And I was like, that's so fascinating because every phase, he needs a different sound or a lack of it. To get himself into the page. So okay, so you're doing, like a big fight, John Williams. Yes. So you're doing, people emotional scene. You go with Chopin. Yes. And then when you are just, transferring what Mark sent you on the screen. You need no noise. Like, I need absolute silence to grab my head around what he needs and put it on the page. So
I get that completely, and it's really interesting because I think I know what he means as well. Because when he's doing his structural stuff, whenever he's doing the layouts and everything, there's the finishing. It's not that it's mechanical, but it's something he can almost switch off a little bit when he's doing it as well, isn't it? Whereas so much thought goes into how you're telling the story. Once you've told the story, even in thumbnails, then a lot of it is actually just your level of talent that you can go in and just finish that stuff. That's really fascinating. I'm always amazed how other people work. I love it. I love to hear how writers start their day and how they end their day and what they do during the day. Like, here's something I mean, as a Spanish guy, right? You'll know this. Because Spain has an unusual structure to the working day compared to America.
Absolutely,
there's a little break in the day.
Compared to everybody else, I think, in the world.
But how does that work in terms of if you're doing something creative as we do, where it takes a little while to get into it and it takes a little while to come back out of it? Do you go through that twice a day? Like where you have to get into it twice because of that big break in the middle of the day?
In my case, it's not because since I work at home, I just get up, have my lunch in the living room, and come back to the studio and doesn't change. But for example, Paloma she just has lunch in the office.
Right.
So there's a bit of a legend, of that disconnection we have. My dad used to have it, and that for me that was always incredible. He came from the office, had lunch at home, had a little siesta because that was more, in his 20 years ago than it is now. And then he had a nap, got up like a clock, get on the car, went back to the office. And for me, that was always fascinating to see how he could do that. It was getting home. I remember 1:45, lunch at 2 p.m. Finish around 3. Up from 3 to 3:45. 45. Get up, get back, be at work at 4.
That's fast. And what time did he get home at night time?
At like 8.
8, right? Because you know what I love about Spain? I'm in Spain all the time. You know what I love visiting Spain? Is the idea that no matter what time of night you go out, there's always people having dinner somewhere. Which is great, isn't it? So if you're hungry at 12:45 a.m. or something, you'll find a packed restaurant. If you want some paella, it's there for you. I like that lifestyle.
I just think we use more hours of the day.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. That's what I miss with lockdown as well, is getting into mainland Europe. I do miss it. Like, I love Paris, I love Barcelona, I love Madrid, and I really miss it. Even Rome I like too, but I don't go to as often. I'm more a France and Spain guy, really. So.
Yeah, well, we miss you too. So, Jesus gotta go back.
Next summer we should go for a beer. We should get out, sit all day in an open air restaurant and just drink all day. I can't wait. We should make up for this year. Yes,
we gotta make for all the days with me from drinking together. We gotta make it up. So we gotta start counting the boxes of beers. Okay, we're going to be together for 3 days. We gotta drink this many boxes of beer. Maybe we'll die. Okay, we gotta compensate for this boring fucking apocalypse. Felipe says, I would like to know the story behind Unfunnies. My friend throw it out the window, but in the end he understood that it was unpleasant because you wanted it to be that way.
Yes, it was fascinating because it was my first creator-owned bunch of projects. I'd wanted American Jesus and Unfunnies were the first 3 that were out, and everybody hated it. It sold quite well. I think it did about 10,000 copies or something, 12,000 I think it even did. But nobody really understood what I was trying to do, and I thought, if nobody understands what you're trying to do, you've failed. If half the people understand it, then okay, you're onto something. But if nobody gets it, then it's not working. And my idea was, I'd just seen a Todd Solondz movie called Happiness. If you've seen Happiness, and it was so disturbing. It was so upsetting. And I remember thinking, I'd like to do something kind of like that. And pop culture tends to move in alternate decades of dark and light. So humor will be very, very light, usually in tough times, and in good economic times, humor goes very dark. So that stuff was really very appealing to me at the time. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to do a horror comic, but using funny animals? And then juxtaposing the two things would be terrifying. And I don't mean funny animals even like a Robert Crumb kind of way, I mean like Carol Barks, So it doesn't look like an underground comic. It looks like a Hanna-Barbera cartoon or a Disney cartoon or something. So I thought, well, that'd be fascinating to have a thing about a child killer or something, but it's drawn in the style of Hanna-Barbera, right? So, but it was too much of an assault on the senses. People were like, this is too much, And I think when you read the final issue, you see where it goes, how it all ties together, and you realize it's actually a horror story, and it's really creepy. But people they didn't like it, and I was like, okay, let's move on. I
think it was too ahead of its time, to be honest. I think that book, what?
Maybe 500 years ahead of its time.
Well, I think that if that book was published now, and I don't mean because you have the Millar World stuff and everything. No. Yeah. I mean that if it was published now, people could understand it a lot more.
Maybe, yeah, possibly. As I haven't looked at it in a long time, but I went on to Kick-Ass, and it's funny because Kick-Ass is so objectionable in its own ways. I mean, Kick-Ass opens with the superhero like masturbating to to pornography online and everything, and it breaks all the rules, and he doesn't have any powers, he's ugly, he's just a regular kid and everything, but it seems so much more mainstream after doing something like Unfunnies, but I never try and anticipate what people are going to like. I always think, what would I like to do now? And that for me, that was a massive breakthrough. Like when I was in my early 20s, late teens when I started, I used to think, what's the trend? You know, what's everybody into? You know, and it's the biggest mistake you'll ever make because you'll always be at least 2 years behind everything. You know,
I think that makes sense if when you're a kid as an artist or writer. You know, that you see the trend and you got in a way.
Yeah,
you want to learn from it.
Yes, that's true.
You don't want to copy, but you want to learn from it. And then when you become your own man, your own writer, you are like, no, that's enough. I learned the craft. I learned, you know, I read a lot of whatever, Stephen King, Alan Moore, whatever. And then you're like, okay, now I want to send my own thing. So I want to go with what I feel, with what my guts are asking me to do.
Do you know, that's a really good point. You know, I guess that's the way everything works, isn't it? You know, like there was a time when Stephen Hawking was just learning what Isaac Newton came up with, you know, before he then moves on to his own thing afterwards, you know. So you have to start at the basics with your influences, I guess, don't you? And that's a good way of looking at it. And then you hit a point, I mean, I was in my late 20s where I suddenly thought, I'm just going to do what I like. And there's an excellent chance if you do what you like, there's another bunch of people who also like that, you know, because you're not going to be alone in your tastes. Yeah,
I always talk to artists about this, you know, the new artists that I train. And I see a tree or I see a forest or I see a character and I keep saying, stop trying to draw like that guy.
Yeah.
Like, I know that you copied him because you liked him, whatever. If you don't have your own personality, I cannot see what you're doing. I just see that you're going through that lens. I don't want a lens. I want to see you. And if I can't see you at the first panel, I see somebody else, I'm not interested.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
The first thing I did, the first chapter of this I did, you're going to find this funny. I told something to CB, and then to Rizzo and many others that everybody says, I haven't thought about that. But there's only one thing that you cannot fake as an artist. Is the sky. Even if you're drawing the sky in New York or something else, you're always, as an artist, going to draw the sky you always saw as a kid in front of you when you went to the street. You cannot change it. The sky is the sky you saw as a kid, and it's embedded in your head. So even if you're drawing the sky in New York or LA or somebody else, you are not drawing the sky from New York. You're drawing your own sky.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's not conscious.
Yeah.
You never thought you're drawing this. You just draw a sky because every sky is, more or less the same.
Yeah.
But it's not.
That's amazing. And what's fascinating about that, if I think when I draw myself, if I use photo reference, I might get photo referencing at a car or even a person or clothing or whatever. I've never photo referenced the sky. That's really interesting. It's genius.
It just comes. You just draw. It's many other things that you can have references. You have seen, you have a lot of different shoes. So you don't have shoe. You have seen a lot of t-shirts, a lot of, whatever, art. But the sky, you grew up with it.
Yeah.
You open the window every morning and you saw that sky. So it's like embedded, it's like primal. So when you draw it, you never think what you're drawing the sky off. You're just drawing the sky. And what it comes is what you always saw.
And it's right. You can feel when it's right when you're drawing. Yeah, that's really interesting. It's funny. Have you been following, the kayfabe guys? The kayfabe guys? I discovered that a couple of months back. Brendan McCarthy put me onto it, and I'm obsessed with it. I've been checking them all out. And they made a great observation, which I'm now obsessed with as well, which is that when you're a kid, the artists who you really hate, when you're a comic fan as a 9-year-old, become your favorite artists when you're older, and the guys who you really rated when you were 9, it's so basic, you can't look at it. But what's really interesting is mainstream people, like guys who are not comic fans, they love the stuff that the 9-year-olds love, but the comic fans graduate into something else. And the example they gave was Frank Robbins. And Frank Robbins is a kid. I hated Frank Robbins when he was doing Captain America and everything. I was like, this kid's terrible, But as an adult, I now have some Frank Robbins original artwork hanging up above my office, above the fireplace in my office. I love it. And the very photorealistic stuff when you're a kid is very impressive because when you're drawing for your mum and dad, you try and draw it as like real life as possible. And the more you do it like real life, the more they're ecstatic about it, aren't they? Whereas if you draw something quite cartoony and expressionistic, your parents are not impressed.
Yeah.
So I think in the same way as you become older, as a comic fan, you really appreciate the cartoonists. And these are all my favorite guys now. These are the guys I love. And I find myself, it's the guys I'm drawn to working with. Like Goran Parlov, I think, is probably one of the 3 greatest artists in the industry right now. He's a genius. But it's not photoreal. It's the world of Goran Parlov you're looking at.
Yeah, that's why I always go with Paco Roca. Yesterday we had the same conversation, and that's why I always go. It's like favorite artist. Like I always gotta say Jaime Hernandez.
Yes, yeah, he is great
because he's the guy who's gone from many lines to needed, you know, to get it done, and now to the synthesis of the smallest amount of lines.
Yeah,
pure black, pure white. You just see the page and this is perfect. And I could say Stuart too. You know, which is the reason everybody says Stuart is the best between the artists.
Yeah,
because he came from a point, you know, the beginning. There was some Adam accusing him.
Yeah,
but then he came to a point where he was like, I want to do next wave, and I can just switch my style. Boom.
Oh,
and then I can do something else, and then go so to the point where every line is where it needs to be.
Perfect. Yeah. Perfect.
Capullo could be another example of that.
Yeah, well, I think like Stuart, everybody seems like Clark Kent, and he's suddenly taking his glasses off and he's Superman. You're like, you can do anything. Of course, you can do anything. You're Stuart Eminem, and he's a guy he's so good that I think he's underappreciated by people who aren't draftsmen themselves. You know, like Garcia Lopez was exactly the same.
Yeah.
Who, for me, is maybe the greatest artist ever in the industry. Ever, you know, he's like my all-time favorite. I'm so wrapped up in him because it's my childhood and everything as well, you know. So I love him, and I got his email address a few months ago and became a little bit friendly with him, which was so exciting to me because I love him so much. But I think that Stuart almost has the same problem he has, which is that he's so good it looks effortless. It's such a natural talent, and the guys who draw millions of little details that don't matter, to me, they're the guys who are hiding their insecurities where they don't know exactly where to put the pen. It's like Modigliani. Modigliani, as an artist, was able to strip everything down to the point where just a few lines told you everything you needed to know. And I think Stuart Eminem, Jaime Hernandez, you know, these guys are there.
Yeah. Last week, Dave Gibbons, as you know, same thing. Garcia Lopez. The other day, Chiarello, the same thing. Every conversation we had is, and I don't even ask, is who's the best? Garcia Lopez. That's it. Yeah. And I agree with you about Stuart. Stuart is he's appreciated by the fans, yes, but he's mostly appreciated by the artist and writer communities. Like, he is the guy.
Yeah, which is quite nice, isn't it? To have the complete respect of your peers, in a way, is very flattering because, you know, if you're a reader, you know, as when you actually are working on anything for decades, you know exactly what makes something work and what doesn't make it work. It's almost like you get X-ray vision. Like, comic fans will think that they're obsessed with comics until they meet a pro and they realize, no, hang on, you guys are really obsessed with comics. You know, you guys think about it all the time. We might think about other stuff sometimes. Comic pros just think about comics all the time and talk about comics. So we can spot if somebody's really good. You know, we can see how difficult it is to make it look that easy, you know. So especially you talk to artists, and artists bow down before Garcia Lopez and Stuart. They're like the two guys, I think, you know. And Frank Whiteley, I think, as well. I think a lot of
absolutely. When you discuss about composition and storytelling, what a definitive comic book page is, it's gotta be Frank. That says it's Frank. You know, this every time I talk to an artist about, you know, learning storytelling, learning composition, I like just go with a Whiteley book. So any just go any. You know, you're going to learn more with one issue of Frank Whiteley than with most other artists.
And it's fascinating because, you know, when an art style becomes popular, it gets a lot of imitators. And I remember saying to somebody a few years ago, there's not that many Frank Whiteley imitators. I mean, there are a couple. There's a couple of guys. It's not like, you know, whenever the Image guys burst on the scene and there was like a million guys doing like that. And I said to, I can't remember if it was Dave Gibbons or somebody, I was saying to a pal, why do you think there's no Frank Whiteley imitators? Really, there's maybe 3, you know, because this guy's so successful and everybody wants to be him. And they said, because it's really hard to imitate him. You know, you can imitate guys who are average or flashy or whatever. You can't imitate a genius. You know, so you can draw something slightly in the style of Mobius, but you can't really get in the ring with somebody like Mobius. You know, these guys are just on another level. You know,
Yeah.
so don't try and be them. You know.
Yeah, because you know, with Frank, it doesn't look simple.
No.
And when you want to imitate somebody, of course, you try to be with, okay, that's something I think I can copy, master, learn from.
Yeah.
But for most people, when you say Frank, they're like, you know, like there's a step, like that's really difficult. That way of composing, that way of storytelling.
Yeah.
That people doesn't get into it so fast because it looks difficult, it looks complex, which is something that, as you said, Rasman really appreciate.
Yeah,
we know what Frank does.
Yeah,
most of us can do it.
Yeah, the perspective. We say a panel and everything. It's like inhuman, you know. I can't imagine what goes on in his brain that he can pull this stuff out. It's incredible. I could maybe.
You can't imagine I've been talking for 30 years.
But I mean, how lucky am I that I've actually got to work with all these guys though as well? You know, like, I mean, it always amazes me. Like Olivier Coipel, I'm obsessed with. You know, I think he's maybe the best in the industry right now. You know, I think Olivier is something special. You know, I mean, he's incredible. And I get the pages back. He's drawing Magic Order 2 just now. You know, and like I get the pages back, and I'm like, it's like winning the lottery every day. When these PDFs are coming in and you're seeing the art coming in from all these guys, it's amazing, you know.
With Olivier, I agree. It's like if you just count it as pure talent, like a force of nature.
Yeah,
I think there's nobody that is even close. He's just a force of nature. Just see, boom, and you're like, okay.
And I don't know how it would make you feel as an artist if you're sitting drawing your page and then you just see some Olivier stuff coming up on the screen. I think you'd be like, oh. Great. Okay. You know, it must be like Robert De Niro joining a movie set.
Just walking around. Who do we have? Oh, this and that. Oh, Robert De Niro just joined the cast. Oh, fuck. Okay. Well. Okay. Dave Da Silva asks, who can drink more alcohol? You or Frank Whiteley? I know the answer, but I want to answer.
Oh, me easily. Yeah, easily. Yeah, he can smoke more dope. He can smoke more dope. I can drink more alcohol.
He said it. I didn't. Berenjena Atomica. So that is the atomic origin, just so you know his name. Could Mark talk about the writers who influenced his work, please?
Oh, I mean, almost all writers have influenced my work. You know, I mean, I'll give you the very quick chronological thing, right? Okay. Growing up as a little kid, Carrie Bates, who a lot of people don't know, but I love his. I mean, he really is probably my biggest influence. Weirdly, although my style's different, nothing excited me more about comics than Carrie Bates stories as a kid. For people who don't know him, he wrote Superman probably from like the late 60s or something. I think he was a teenager when he started, up until about 1985. He wrote like 2 Superman books a month pretty much that whole time. He and Elliot S. Maggin wrote together a bit. Huge influences. Jerry Conway I loved at that time as well, and still do. I'm proud to call him a friend now. You know, I love Jerry Conway. He's a brilliant guy. And I love guys like Len Wein, Roy Thomas, and everybody. You know, but I think Carrie and Jerry were probably my 2 biggest ones. Jerry was writing Justice League when I was a kid, and George Perez was drawing it, which was amazing. I don't know if you saw those books, but fantastic. It was like maybe
in the showcase, the showcase big books from the sea. It's like somewhere around there. Yeah, but
I mean, like I think it's 195, 193 to 195 or something. Like those ones, they're like my favorite comics. I love them. And I probably at an age where I'd have been just getting out of comics, you know, maybe 12 or something. Alan Moore then appeared on the scene, and I think maybe not, I don't know, but I'd maybe have left comics at that point. But then as soon as Alan Moore arrives at just the right time, you're like, okay, this is amazing. Then I met Alan Moore when I was 13, and he bought me an issue of Swamp Thing because I didn't have the money to buy it. Like, I remember I only had my bus fare home, you know, and I'd been at a comic mart that day, and I bought like 4 Superman comics or something for 40 pence each, you know, like less than €1, you know. And I had, I just had enough money to get the bus back home. And I met Alan Moore and I got his autograph. And he said to me, I've started writing this book called Swamp Thing. And I was like, all right. I said, I only buy books with Superman in them. I was still pretty young, I said, only buy books with Superman. I said, I've got no money left. And he says, I'll buy it for you. And I remember it was 45 pence. And Moore took out a 50 pence piece and he paid for the comic and he autographed it to me. And I still have it upstairs, actually. And Moore gave it to me and I read it on the bus home. And I was like, this is the best thing I've ever read in my life, And I loved Moore. Then I discovered Frank Miller, probably a little later than everybody else. I got into Frank Miller a little bit later, maybe the mid-'80s, just as Miller was coming towards doing Dark Knight and everything, because Marvel wasn't very well distributed where I grew up, so I didn't see a lot of that stuff. Then the later 80s, you had guys like Grant, Pete, Jamie Delano come in as the next wave of Alan Moore. Very different ways, actually, And then from there, you had Garth Ennis coming, Adam Smith, who's a great British writer and everything too. So, I mean, non-stop. And then the 90s, you had Kurt Busiek and Mark Waid just ruling that decade. They were the best writers of that decade. I mean, the stuff they did at Marvel and DC was easily the best stuff coming out of the company in the 1990s, So, look, I mean, all those guys, I love them all. They're all my influence.
Yeah, you're primarily, I guess, you just said Superman, a DC guy more than a Marvel guy.
Yeah.
Growing up.
Oh, definitely.
Is there somebody calls you tomorrow and says, hey, DC character you have never written, you want to write?
Yeah.
That's your book.
Do you know
I know you're very busy and you're doing your own stuff, so
yeah.
But would you like to just do one book of a character you've never done?
Do you know, I get that call quite a lot. Like Marvel and DC, like different people at the company don't realize that I'm a president in Netflix, so I'm on staff, so I can't work anywhere else.
I know.
So, but I do get that call and I'll say, I'd love to, and I actually got offered an amazing thing that was a little hard to turn down, but, one of my friends at one of the companies phoned me up and says, and I can't tell you what it is because I think it's going to be a very big thing that they are going to do anyway, They said, would you like to do this? And I never really like to get a project. I like to originate my own stuff, like Superman Red Son or Old Man Logan or something. I like to just work it up because for me, it has to come from inside me. Like I don't really like it if somebody says, hey, would you like to do the sequel to Watchmen or something? That wouldn't really appeal to me, But, occasionally I'll get that call where they say, do you want to do this? I was like, oh, it would be nice, but I can't. But in terms of stuff, Rafa Albuquerque, Rafa?
Of course, yeah.
Friend of mine, and Rafa and I were talking yesterday, and Rafa contract for years and years, I says, but I still do a Batman, that'd be great. And he had a really, really good idea, as a good visual sense for it, like something that would make it quite different from other Batman books. And I was like, yeah, that'd be really cool, And I'd love to do a Justice League. I'd love to do a Green Lantern. I'd love to do an Aquaman. I think, I'm less interested in 70-issue runs.
Yeah,
as more like Frank Miller. Just get Dave Mazzucchelli. Get somebody amazing for 4 issues. Go in and do the best you've ever seen. That's what I love. I love guys who get in and out like an assassin. So I imagine a great 4-issue Aquaman series with Frank Quitely. Or Adam Hughes doing Green Lantern or something like that. Just a great 4, 5, 6 issue thing that I keep on my shelf forever, and that really appeals to me.
Yeah, I could see, not because it's not going to happen, but I could see you and Stuart doing the definitive Batman.
I think we could have a good time on it. I think it could be good. I love Bruce Wayne. I've got a very different way of doing Bruce Wayne from how everybody else has done Bruce Wayne. Certainly for the last 40 years, and I've got a take on Bruce Wayne that could be really fun. So maybe a few years down the line, Rafa and I may.
Who knows? Not the time. Yes. Love from Howard says, how did you create the initial idea for the Ultimates? It was something that you and Hitchy worked together a lot, or you just gave him the like, this is the plot, go with it?
Oh no, it was very collaborative actually. I'll give you the background on it. The Avengers was something I've always loved. I didn't really read many issues of the Avengers growing up because, like I say, distribution wasn't very good. But I don't know if in Spain, Panini did Spanish editions. Did you get that as a kid?
Panini Spain does Marvel here, yes.
Well, we had something similar in the UK, where they would repackage old Marvel stories. So, but it wasn't anything recent. So when I was,
it's translated and all that, but yeah, it's in Spain. Yeah.
So we would get black and white versions of 60s Marvel comics. I was reading that stuff maybe when I was 7 or something, maybe 1977. I was reading 1962 Marvel comics, so it was quite weird. It was a bit of a drag to it. But it was the best material in the world, because it was Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Don Heck, Iron Man, and all that, just really classic stuff. So I read Avengers in that format. So I was quite out the loop with Avengers. I just had a few issues, but I always loved it. And one of the things I got was the John Buscema, Roy Thomas Avengers, which are just amazing. They're probably the best the run has ever been.
Yeah.
And that was always in my head of how to do Avengers like that. So when I got the opportunity to do the Ultimates, I said to Marvel, I'd like to do it kind of different from a regular superhero book. I'd like it to feel like people, the way the Buscema stuff did, where I remember there was a picture of Hank Pym, Giant Man, wearing just a coat. And I remember a really beautiful kind of short 1960s coat, like a mini coat on Wasp, while she's sitting having a coffee, sitting chatting. And it looked like people who happened to be wearing superhero costumes mixed in with their regular clothes. And it was always so visually fascinating to me because I'd never seen anything like that. Like most superheroes look more iconic and they're standing there like statues, whereas these people were just having human gestures. I mean, it was very interesting. And 2 different artists were offered to me for the Ultimates. I started writing it. I just started issue 1. And I had a very clear idea of how it had to look. And I said to Joe Quesada, these guys aren't right. They hadn't started drawing anything. But I said, we need to go with somebody else. And I think it's Brian Hitch. And he just he'd go and live in Florida. Joe Hitch was starting at the time. And Brian had signed with them for like 5 years. And Joe was like, it's no use. And I was like, Joe, please, if there's anything you can do. So Marvel, to their amazing credit, Bill Jamis and Joe did some kind of deal and managed to get Brian. I don't know what has happened. He hadn't signed his contract or something. But we managed to get him and brought him in. And it was one of those Scorsese, De Niro kind of moments, where the 2 of you meet and you'll do something a little bit special together. And every phone call Brian and I did was like 3 hours long, And Brian would also throw in these amazing thoughts, of how this should look. And wouldn't it be amazing if the scene was shot from this angle and maybe starting the scene a little earlier here? So Brian, he's a very, very interesting artist. He's got a lot of great ideas. And it was just a joy. And it took a long time. But Joe Quesada made a really brilliant point. And he says, I think we were 4 months late with one issue. And then the next issue was 5 months late. It was ridiculous, right? Because Brian was adding a lot of pages to make it a single page, a double page spread, all that kind of stuff. And Joe Quesada said, nobody ever talks about how on time something was. They talk about how good it was. And he said to Bill, I don't want to get any fill-in out. As Brian Hitch is doing something really special here, And it was great, and we've got 26 issues that we're really proud of, we're really happy with. And, Marvel loved enough that most of it for their cinematic universe, the Avengers movies and things like this, So I'm really delighted, That's the origin of it, and that's how we work together,
Yeah. Nobody remembers how late Watchmen issue 12 was.
That's true. It's absolutely true. Imagine that had been drawn by somebody else. Imagine they just
No. I could just kill them all and make Dave redraw it. Ivan Valladares asks, will Empress have a sequel? It has been a wonder in every way, and I'm very grateful to you guys for creating it.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, 100%. I mean, there's a sequel and Stuart has stepped back in comics because I think his kid's a little older now, and I think he wants to spend a little more time with his wife. They're traveling a little and everything, which is great, But he did say, "I'm 100% on for Empress 2 and Empress 3," because it's his baby. He did it the first volume. And what's interesting now is because I work at Netflix, the projects aren't really figured out in terms of publication based on comics anymore. It's actually based on what our plan is overall. So like Jupiter's Legacy, the TV show, will be out in a few months' time. Like the priority now, the 2 final volumes of that done. so that those are there for whenever the TV show's there and everything. So it's a slightly different way of working now. You know, there's other things that are suddenly priorities. The Magic Order TV show is being put together right now. So I really need to, I've written volume 2 and I need to do volume 3 so that the continuity is all there for the showrunner and for the team of writers and everything. So Empress the first movie has just been written right now. There was a draft that was done that didn't quite work out. So 2 new writers have been brought in and it's being written just now. And we'll move on to Empress 2 as a comic, probably when the movie goes into production next year. We'll probably shift into the comic then. So I guess the comic will be out 2022, I would say. The big priorities now is, coincidentally, I mean, I obviously had no idea there was a global pandemic coming, you know, but like I decided to take March this year until March next year off in terms of bringing stuff out, just to let myself catch up a little, let the artists get ahead and everything. And it's incredible because the industry has essentially gone into the phantom zone for this year anyway, you know, it's crazy. But I'm focusing on all these projects just now, like Jupiter's Magic Order, a brand new series that we're doing based on a film that I created at Netflix. It's a Netflix original movie. And the third big project in the sci-fi series that I've done, there was Sharky the Bounty Hunter, Space Bandits, and there's a third franchise that are all going to tie together into a trilogy of 3 movies. So it's going to be 9 movies in total, pulling all those things together. So we're working on all of those just now at the same time as doing the first movie for each of them. See, when you say it out loud, you realise this is why I look so tired.
You look amazing, as always. Where does Eduardo Rizzo fit in all of this?
How do you know about it? Because he's a big secret. How did you find out about that?
Because he told me in one of this. I am not kidding. It's recorded. Like, Mark Millar in one of his books, and I was like, shit, you should said that. Anyway, don't say what. We just.
Well, you know, I don't have to give away too much, but like he starts on it in July. I wrote it a few months ago. It starts in July. Eduardo, I mean, I keep saying everybody's in the top 3, but I love him so much. I mean, I've loved Eduardo for over 20 years, you know, and he finally had a little gap in his schedule. I was like, Eduardo, would you please? And he was like, yes, you know, and it was like, it's like asking somebody out on a date for years and they finally say yes. And I'm like, oh, amazing, you know, he's fantastic.
I would not have never asked you if he hadn't said it online or live. I am not that bad. I'm about it, but not that big about it. Let me see. Can Mark talk about Kick-Ass and how he was working with JR? Did you like the movie adaptations, by the way?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, it was genuinely one of the best things that's ever happened to me. You know, like, and working with Johnny's amazing. I mean, Johnny and I did Wolverine back in 2004. And we instantly just clicked. You know, it was one of those things where sometimes you can work with a really great artist, an amazing artist, but it doesn't quite gel with your own style, you know. And chemistry is a very unusual thing. And I've been lucky, I would say, in the last 20 years, there's maybe once or twice where the chemistry hasn't felt right, where it just doesn't look right on the page from what was in my head. Usually the artist elevates what I'm doing. I love what they do. But Johnny was one of those guys that, when the first page came back, I was like, on Wolverine, it was like, this is perfect. And when I say first page, Johnny's so fast. You know, all 24 pages of the first Wolverine we did came back at once. And I remember seeing that last page and was like, oh my God, you know, I've waited for this guy my whole life, you know. And we said we've had such a good time and we get on so well personally, you know. We said we must do something together again at some point. And I had a couple of ideas. Hit Girl was going to be our own character at one point, and I was going to do that. I was thinking about somebody like Tim Sale. I had Tim Sale in my mind for doing Hit Girl, and this was maybe about 2004. And I also had an idea for doing Kick-Ass, which was going to be about a kid trying to be a superhero. And then I realized, no, these would work really well together. You know, put them together because the kid who's trying to be a superhero needs somebody to train him up, and if you're not that good, a regular guy, you're not like Spider-Man or something, you're probably going to get killed quite quickly. So I had somebody who could sort of keep him alive until the end of the story. So I just pushed the two things together, and he became Luke Skywalker, and she became Han Solo. And Big Daddy was Ben Kenobi. You know, he was the guy who had to die. He was the master who had to die. You know, and that storyline. So it all came together really quite easily, and that's how it all came. And I sent it out to Johnny. And Johnny was like, love it. You know, Johnny was really into it. And we just started drawing. And it was one of those things back then. I remember I didn't have enough money to pay pay for anybody to draw stuff. So the guys who were doing the stuff for the first few projects, later I was lucky I could pay them more than Marvel and DC could pay them. But at the beginning, I would say to them, look, all I can do is offer you half of everything. You know, if there's a movie of this, you get half. If there's a toy, a Pez dispenser, you get half of it. And that was the deal. We did a handshake, and everybody, when we sold the company years later, everybody got 50% of everything, you know. They all became super rich, you know. But like, but back in those days, I said to Johnny, look, I don't know how long this is going to take you. I can't pay you anything. And he was like, I believe in the project. And he did it on spec, which was amazing.
Especially being JR.
Well, he loves money. He does love money, you know, but he...
No, I mean because of how big he was at Marvel at that
well,
time.
Exactly, yeah. And you get paid...
JR, who's the guy who says...
I mean, he's Marvel's biggest artist, you know. Yeah, and I think he was paid a lot more dough than I could ever have paid him, you know. So it was amazing that he said, no, I'll do it for free. I believe in the project, and I think we'll make good money in the back end. And about a year later, we did. You know, it took about a year, but the first issue sold a lot. You know, it sold... By the time you had, I think there was like 7 printings of issue 1 or something. And it sold 120,000 copies issue 1 when you added them all up. And you got $1 an issue. And Johnny and I were like, okay, we can do more of these. This is great.
Yeah. Okay. Have you talked, Felipe asked, have you talked with Clint Eastwood to make a star like as director and actor?
Do you know, it's funny, so many different actors have been discussed for this. Like Ryan Coogler, the guy who did Black Panther, before he did Black Panther, I think it may have been just after he did Black Panther, he was talking to Fox about it, about directing it. And I think Black Panther just became so big that ended up consuming everything, you know, and he was off to Black Panther 2. But Ryan Coogler was very keen to do it for a little while. And he wanted Sylvester Stallone to play the lead, you know. Clint would have been perfect 20 years ago, but I mean, Clint's 86, I think, now. So you're never...
He turned 90.
Yeah. Oh, God, that's crazy. Well, so, like, I mean, if he was 65, yeah, but you're not... I mean, you don't quite buy Harrison Ford running. You're never buying Clint Eastwood running down a corridor now, you know?
Yeah. I'm going to give you a crazy name. Clive Owen.
He's so young, though, isn't he? Is he not still quite young? Is he not?
No, I think he's almost 60.
Is he? I thought he was about 45. He looks like a Scottish guy at 40.
He does. That's true. Maybe he doesn't look old enough. You're right. Right.
I think Bruce Willis would be good. I know we talked about Bruce Willis originally, and one of the producers, Simon Kinberg, thought he had a really interesting idea back when it was over. In fact, it still is at Fox. He was talking about Tom Hanks, which is really, and I was like, what? And then I thought about it, and I thought that could be quite cool. And you could have Colin Hanks playing the young Duke McQueen in the pre-credit sequence as well, because he looks almost exactly like his dad.
Let's be honest, he's a fucking clone of his dad.
Yes. He was the best investment they ever made, you know. And like, at first, I mean, everybody in the room went, what? And then within about 30 seconds, we were all, sorry, that's my Netflix call. This is my sophisticated phone. I'm going to have to take this.
Everybody, thank you, Mark.
Sorry to run off. It's great talking to you, Dave.
Love you, my friend. Bueno, como habéis visto, que no os mentí al principio, que esto iba a ser una hora acordada porque le iban a llamar de Netflix. Ay, perdón que me da la risa. Y le han llamado de Netflix. Entonces ha tenido que cortar. Espero que lo podamos repetir otro día. Y aquí lo dejamos. Hasta el lunes. Buen fin de semana a todos. Corte. Así, el lunes con nosotros, si es posible por la situación en Estados Unidos, por la mañana Brian Bendis, que ya sabes que lo retrasamos la semana pasada. Y por la tarde, el gran Dennis Cowan.